And we would love to see everybody's faces tonight. But I have to warn you, because we're thinking about this is about the human condition. But we will be recording and it will be on YouTube. So if you are a little bit shy, turn your video off, that's fine. But we just thought it'd be lovely to see lots of faces and feel as connected as possible tonight in this digital arena. So yes, welcome to the Festival of Better Ideas, part of the RCA Service Design Programme Show. It's great to have you all here tonight. I'm Carolyn Runcie. I'm a Programme Manager and Tutor on the programme, and I've been part of the programme for 8 years now. I co-founded the programme with Nick Deleon, our previous head of programme. And this showcase tonight, it's the final theme night of our festival. We're ending on a high here. And the theme nights are all about showcasing the amazing work that our amazing students have done, especially in this very challenging year. And it's about bringing to life their work, and it's also helping us and share and explore the themes relating to service design, and what it means and in this evolving practice and emerging academic discipline. And we're also tonight really happy to welcome Jennie Winhall, who is an amazing social innovator and service design expert, who's going to be in conversation with the students throughout the event, and also sharing a little bit about her work that she's been involved in, very much connected to the themes that the students have been exploring, and very much about what it is to be human, what to consider. So welcome, Jennie. Sorry, everyone, my slides seem to be a bit slow tonight. So for those of you who don't know, this programme has been going for 8 years now. We're in our 8th year. It's a really pioneering course, and it's grown immensely over the last 8 years. We started off with 20 students in our first year and second years. We're now at 140, so one of the biggest programmes at the college. I think fashion is just about pipping us still. And it's all about providing the antidote to technology push and poor services that create accidental, really bad experience and damage our trust and expectations. So it's an optimistic course, and we're here to change things. And our students are here to change things. This was us at the beginning of the last academic year. It's our first and second years. And as you might be able to see, they are from all over the world. And they're from many different disciplines. So not just the design disciplines, but from medical backgrounds, engineering, digital, social science. So they're an amazing blend of experiences, ambitions, and it just leads to great results. And of course, in the last few months, our events have been purely digital. And here we are here with us, mainly second year students, some first year in the picture too, coming together and celebrating after the final exams. And this year, they won't be at the Royal Albert Hall physically, but they pretended that they were, and they're celebrating digitally. So this was a really fun night. And as I said, it's been a really tumultuous year. The class of 2020 have really shown their resilience and their positivity, their optimism, and they have taken that on, and they haven't been afraid to look at difficult issues that we're facing, and looking at how the problems of technology, making society more equal, looking after the planet are all things they really care about, and their projects really show that. So this is a really special year, and we're really, really proud of our students and excited for them to share with you the results of all their hard work. And the results of the work of the whole college. There are over 800 projects that are on the RCA's first digital show. It's quite a thing, and a good opportunity for you to explore all other programs. So what you will see when you come to the RCA digital show are all the different, these kind of tiles that represent projects of each student in the college. And when you click on a tile, it will take you into more information about the students and their projects. And on ours, you'll see that there are 2 identical tiles in places, because in our program, some of our students team up and they work together collaboratively. But we've also created this really great archive on our own little website, where it's allowed us to highlight the 6 themes this year that have emerged from the areas of interest of our students. So we've got urban living, which was our first theme night last week at the beginning of the festival, which has got several amazing projects in. And just highlighting one of the projects, Lot, was looking at how to enable and empower citizens to claim unloved plots in their local community and be safe in the knowledge that they can grow vegetables, flowers, without the local authorities coming and digging them up. So a really fascinating project that we encourage you to go and explore all of those on our website. Then new money is another theme that came through. And for example, we've got Evergreen, which was Sustainable Investment Fund. So go check those ones out as well. And Living Well, several projects here, and a couple of them looking at caring for carers who are looking after relatives with dementia and loved ones who are coming to the end of life. So really very moving, really powerful projects in that particular theme too. And Future Skills, one of those projects in particular looking at the future of consultancy and the power of storytelling in bringing together large organizations and to help individuals be part of the conversation about what the future means for the organization. Last night's theme night was climate choices. And here we've got another set of amazing projects. There's Birdie, that is encouraging young people and families to connect more with nature and understand the nature around them in their local communities. And then we've got Climate 101, the passion to embed climate change into the curriculum of every university in the country. So all really very grounded, inspiring work. And tonight, the human condition. So we've got 9 projects in this theme. One of them unfortunately can't make it tonight, but we've got 8 others who you'll be hearing about shortly, and how optimistic they all are. And really the values, the human values tonight we're going to talk about, but also the values of the students, but the values of our program we really dug into at the beginning of the academic year, and our second years led a project to help us pinpoint and communicate those values, what's important to us as people, as service designers, as a program. So all of these, being curious, courageous and collaborative, are extremely important ways for us to, qualities for us to have as service designers, to be dynamic, innovative, and to want to make a difference in the world, to transform things and question the organisation and the society that we're in, how we make those changes for the better, and putting people at the heart of it, caring about the planet and having a real sense of purpose are all things that we're very aligned to, and we're sure you all are as well, not just service designers. I just thought I'd take this opportunity before we go back into the main body of the event and our students is Jennie. As I said before, she will be talking to our students about their work and sharing also her work too. She started off, well, when I first met Jennie, she was at the Design Council and moved on to being one of the co-founders of Participle, who were really influential on public policy in the UK at the time and rethinking issues like unemployment, aging population, and they're very aligned to some of the themes tonight as well. She's currently based in Denmark, so she might share a little bit more about that, and also an associate at the Rockwell Foundation Intervention Unit in Canada. So she'll be sharing a little bit more about that too. So I'm going to thank you for my introduction. It's not about any of this really, I just wanted to set the context and to hand you over to our amazing students so that you can actually hear more from them, be inspired and learn a little bit about more their work and the potential of service design and their contribution to it. So Emilia, if I can hand over to you and share your screen, thank you so much.
Sure, thank you, Carolyn. And let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see it?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, cool. So hello all, thank you Carolyn for the introduction, and thank you also Jenny for joining us today. So I'm Emilia, and together with Soumya, I work with the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham on developing join-up approaches in local government. So we started off with the big challenge of understanding how we can support children and families at risk better in order to prevent child neglect. This is a priority of the Council, comprising 46% of child protection issues in the borough. And if not addressed, there is a high risk for the child to end up in social care and negative consequences into adulthood as well. So we were completely new to this challenging context and work very closely with primary schools who are at the forefront of identifying children at risk, and frontline workers as well, who deliver services to children and families. So this being a multifaceted issue, we mobilize an ecosystem of primary schools, public services, commissioners, the Insight and Innovation Hub in the Council, and agencies in charge of preventative services in the borough, to name a few. We engage with all of them through a collaborative process, starting with discovering barriers in the system through qualitative research, defining and prioritizing problems through evidence gathered, developing solutions collaboratively with experts in the field, and then delivering through multiple rounds of prototyping and testing. So through research, what we found was that there was a lack of join-up approaches between practitioners in the system who needed to work together for shared outcomes. So we observed recurring patterns of information deficit and lack of communication channels in the 3 key moments of supporting children at risk, which are identifying needs, activating support, and receiving feedback. We set out to enable collaboration between schools, public services, and the Council through effective information and communication flows, which would then allow all of these actors to provide support to vulnerable families early, quickly, and more effectively. So getting things done in a local government in the middle of a pandemic seemed hard, and to turn our vision into reality, we developed an action strategy. So we use low-tech collaborative methods to cater to a wide range of audiences. We followed an hypothesis-led approach that enabled us to be iterative, test things quickly, and build evidence of what works and what doesn't. We started with quick wins to create a precedent and get buy-in for longer-term interventions. And we created solutions embedded in existing channels and ways of working to make use of available resources, avoid big learning curves, and increase ease of implementation.
So finally, coming to the outcomes of our project, these approaches led us to develop 3 interventions that sit in the 3 moments that we showed you before. And so the service tool enable knowledge transfer and improve the flow of information and communication to facilitate joined up approaches between agencies. So the first one is the Partner Information Portal, which allows the Council to securely share crucial information on children and families at risk to school staff so they can better identify needs and support them. The information consists of current and past service involvement and any immediate risks. The second intervention is the Interactive Service Guidance, which is a set of tools that enable practitioners to identify needs of families and activate appropriate support services to support them. And lastly, the third intervention is a new feedback and handover process. Feedback and handover process, which enables services to give feedback to practitioners for referrals that are made and redirects them to other more appropriate services. So all of these interventions are being tested and piloted in the borough through different levels of fidelity in order to create an evidence base of what works and what doesn't. And the interventions will enable schools and services to get in much earlier to support vulnerable children. They will reduce inappropriate referrals, time taken to activate support, escalations to statutory services, and ultimately, they would prevent adverse outcomes for families. So while testing the interventions, we saw other services and agencies becoming interested in developing them as well, because the barriers that we identified are almost inherent to other public sector agencies as well. So therefore, we developed Acrossilos service pattern. Next slide. So it's a pattern library that provides a set of tools and guidance to enable joined up approaches and sharing of information between agencies. And the library is designed to be used by service development teams in the council. And we are currently exploring it if it could trigger change in other local authorities as well. It collects 11 patterns organized in 4 main categories of action. So get or give access to citizens' data, orient practitioners to navigate the local offer, provide information about a service, and lastly, redirect a case to more appropriate services. And these patterns can be adapted and combined as per needs and come with instructions and templates such as these that bring them to life. So we won't get into details, but it's currently live. If you'd like to have a look, please feel free to explore it. So the implementation of the interventions is still underway, and through those learnings, we have been continuously informing and strengthening the patterns compiled in the library. So that was just a presentation of our work, and we'd love to share more if that's something of your interest. And yeah, thank you so much. Please get in touch. So the next one, yeah.
Thank you so much, guys.
Handing
over to our next project.
Hi, I'm Radhika, and my partner and me, Fang Hui, worked on Nurture. She won't be here today, but I'll be presenting on our behalf. So we worked closely with Camden Council to look at tackling social isolation among seniors, which was one of their major problems. Next slide, please.
Often, people feel isolated from their surroundings. We worked closely with Camden Council as our main collaborators to look at how we can tackle social isolation amongst seniors. A few weeks back, we met Margot on Zoom. Margot was just 25 when she had arrived in London, just to explore. But she stayed on and she became a public lawyer at the age of 32, advocating for the homeless in London. She finally felt like she had found her purpose. Margot accomplished much and trained barristers as the director when she was just 43. Over the years, just as Margot has been through various transitions in her life, we realized that aging comes with transitions. Life transitions are key moments that can cause social isolation amongst different age groups. And for seniors like Margot, social isolation can happen at any moment in her later life.
Next slide, please. So in order to really understand what are the pain points, the problems, and the opportunities when it comes to isolation among seniors, we did multiple desk research and meetings with Camden Council, our collaborators. And post-COVID, we had to move online, did Zoom calls, very interesting WhatsApp conversations, as well as live journaling of their sessions and their stories to bring it more to life. Next slide, please. While identifying the issues, we realized that there were 4 support circles that generally help the seniors in their later life. One being the family, community, the social care service layer, and the public layer. And amongst these problems, one of the biggest ones that we felt that we need to tackle was social stereotype amongst the public layer. Next slide, please. Seniors are perceived as vulnerable in society, and many young people don't realize or see their unique value. We asked a lot of seniors and youngsters and middle-aged people, what do you think you can learn from an older person? And the most common answers we got was maybe gardening, knitting, cooking, baking. But next slide, please. But when we actually talked to our seniors, all the ones that we had interviewed, we realized that they have this abundance of experiences and knowledge through their life experiences, through their journeys, and just being the coolest person in the room. For example, Roger helped build the Humber Bridge in London. Data, on the other hand, couldn't stop talking about his love for food, as he was an ex-Michelin star chef, and he went to India to teach Chinese cooking. And Christine on the top right was a YSL and Dior model, and we met her when she was around 80 years old. So next slide, please. So we find that there's a missed opportunity here to reutilize seniors' accumulated knowledge and interests to empower their social support network and enhance their sense of agency. Next slide, please. While talking to Laurie, a senior service manager at the Camden Daycare Center, he feels for him that talking to seniors helps him get through difficult situations, such as even accounting, on a monthly basis. They are like a parent figure, but less authoritative. And they're more like a friend, which is actually really valuable. We also realize that bringing older and younger people together not only provides the youth, such as Laurie, with academic and social support, but also boosts older people's mental health by allowing them to give back to younger generations. Next slide, please. We want people to see aging in a new light, and we want to bring the community together, knowing that family and kinships are moving away from us through an age-inclusive co-sharing platform. Next slide, please. Introducing Nurture, a co-sharing platform empowering seniors to have a high engagement within their communities through the intergenerational sharing of accumulated knowledge and interests. Next slide, please. So our main touch points are that of creating awareness, where we would be using seniors to advocate for their unique values and their visibility. And we'd be sending a nurture pack to their homes as well. Beyond that, we'd be having an onboarding physical street fair where everybody can come together as residents and get a chance to know one another. And in order to keep nurturing those relationships, we also have a nurture app that we would be using to establish an age-friendly co-sharing connection. Next slide, please. So for example, here you can see Ella on the left-hand side and Margot, who's a senior. They can both connect on the app and get some, Ella can get help from Margot as well, and Margot can get help from Ella on digital training. Next slide, please. So in all, as a summary, Nurture's design principles are that it is age inclusive, it is resident led, so that's really important to give more agency to seniors. It is asset based, using existing resources within the community like people, places. It is sustainable and low cost, as we'd be giving a lot of visibility to local economy and local facilities as well. Community oriented, and lastly, and most importantly, it's an information hub, making activities and people more accessible to each other. Next slide, please. So let's see what Margot has to say about our service.
Hi, I'm Margot. I'm 73. I'd love to talk to you about how you see the world, given we grew up in different times, also your interests and how they are very different. I'd love help on computers, and happy to talk to you about being a lawyer. I found it very exciting, very rewarding. So hope that's helpful. Bye.
Next slide, please. So we see these shared communities reaching places, breaking traditional barriers. This was one of our prototypes, our first Zoom session where Margot participated, my teammates participated, and Ella was a participant as well. Next slide, please. So yeah, if you'd like to know more about Nurture, please do get in touch with me. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. You could drop me an email or just stay ahead. And keep nurturing your relationships. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, Rajik. That was great. So those are our first two projects of the evening, and I'd like to at this point hand over to Jenny for some reflections and maybe a couple of questions for the students.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. And how exciting it is to see these projects. I actually feel quite intimidated because you've done such high quality work that I'm a bit nervous about asking the right kind of questions to bring out what's behind all your fantastic thinking. And I guess I thought it was really interesting that these two projects have really shown or sort of dug into what it means to value and care for people in very different ways in society, and what it means to design the conditions in which those different kinds of relationships and connections can take place. And you've approached that not in the kind of usual way. So it would have been very obvious, for example, for the Nurture project to focus on what it is that older people need in a very sort of transactional way, and how can you sort of meet their needs. And I think it's very powerful that instead you focused on what their interests are and what stories are behind those interests and where that creates connection. So I would like to ask both project teams what it was that you feel that you learned about the quality of relationship that you had to spark or create in these projects, and what worked to make that happen. And I'm thinking, for example, in Acrossilos, you've made an exceptionally difficult, emotionally upsetting topic that lots of people touch in various parts of the public sector appear very sort of simple. You've managed to make something very simple out of complexity. And I'd like to hear from you what it was you felt you were doing beyond the coordination, I guess, of those activities, and where it was that you felt you touched the real relationships that were starting to form through those new ideas. So it's up to you who starts, but I'd love to hear your insights.
I can start with one of the things, and I mean, we can build on it, but so one of the things that Emilia and I were sort of doing through our project, we were working with multiple people who had, you know, similar visions and similar aspirations that they want to happen with, in terms of, you know, supporting vulnerable children and families. So we were sort of bringing in all of these different perspectives and surfacing them. And I think that was like, that's so simple, but that was so important in our case, because there were so many sides to the same story, and there were so many sort of struggles that people were facing in that same ecosystem. Even though they want the same, you know, they have the same vision and they want the same shared outcome, but it was still a lot about understanding all of these different people and trying to bridge some of those gaps. And I felt like we were like in the middle of that ecosystem, sort of doing that a little bit. That's one of the things.
Yeah, if I can like add on that, completely agree with what Soumya just said. And yeah, I think at the beginning was a lot about building relationship with those people. So really like listening to them, also observing them while they were doing like their job. So at the beginning, COVID wasn't there. So we actually had the opportunity to observe like school teachers at schools dealing with their daily issues. So like listening at all these voices separately, and then find like different way to bring them together. So if it's like a co-creation workshop, or if it's another kind of sessions, but just like making them work together differently, because they were already kind of connected to each other, but like just struggling and stuck in the way that the system is organized.
Thank you. Those were very good. That was very good answers. I really like that idea that you're sort of stewarding different people's visions in the creation of the platform that you're developing. And maybe we could hear from Nurture about what you felt you learned from what's really sparked the right quality of relationship in that project.
Yeah, I think definitely. So it was really difficult to transition from a physical environment to a digital one, especially when we're working with seniors. And we were working with isolated seniors. So we really had to sort of modify the way we took our direction, because it was really hard to access isolated seniors. And I think the way that we got in touch with them was quite an experience for us, because we had to find different ways, word of mouth, or just trying to find people who already are connected to older people through like common groups, like where they'd learn yoga together or something, you know, and try to get in touch with them through that. And as you had mentioned, I think one of the most, motivating things for me was to not have that preconceived notion that we initially went in with, that there is a need that we have to address. But it was more of finding this hidden sort of need or hidden opportunity where seniors could actually be more enabled. And instead of just providing to them, what if you enable them to help them have better purpose in their later life? So as to help them create their own, living experiences within their communities. So that was definitely one thing, because knowing that Camden Council, who we were working with, were also moving away from the direct connection with the seniors. And I think another thing that I learned was probably patience, because it's honestly, sometimes it's very difficult to connect with seniors, really get personal with them, because you can't just directly ask them questions. They're very sensitive about it. So you just have to have conversations and just keep it really fun and casual and let them speak. I think they love to just talk, and that's where all the valuable sort of insights come out from as well. Yeah.
That's very strong. Thank you, Radhika. Huitong, were you going to say anything? So there's some themes there about moving from providing to people to enabling them, which comes through very strongly in your work. And that idea about patience is very interesting as well. One of the things that's very difficult about these kinds of platforms is that you often have a very enthusiastic supply side who are ready to sort of contribute, and less on the demand side, and sort of trying to find how you mediate well between those two. So how do you really build your system or your platform to draw out like where the real connection comes from both sides is a tricky job.
Yeah, I think just on that note as well, one thing that we thought was really valuable in what we did was, sometimes when people you can't see people offering help, you would hesitate to ask them for it. So here on the platform, both parties can actually it's almost like a combination of LinkedIn and Facebook, where you have your experiences as well as your interests, and you're putting yourself out there. So it's much easier for people to just ask if they want guidance from you. And that's something that we were really trying to instill as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think Carolyn will move on to the next.
I think we need to move on, unfortunately, but thank you very much for those fascinating projects. So I'm going to hand over to Cami now to share with us her screen, and we're going to be looking at a project called, it's Cami's project, Heart to Heart. Cami, over to you.
Great, can you guys see the screen? Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the event today. My project is about transforming the visiting experience at the V&A Museum. The museum's main strategic objectives are strengthening storytelling with digital technology and inspiring young people's self-expression. Looking into the changes of needs in the industry, people are now seeking more exciting and surprising experiences. Research has shown that young people prefer other types of experiences than visiting the museum during their free time. From the V&A market research, they discovered that there's a lack of personal connection between visitors and the museum objects. Similarly, from the interviews that I did with non-visitors of the V&A Museum, most of them consider themselves as an outsider of art. They do not know how to appreciate art, and they do not feel the connection with the art museum. To address the above challenges, how might we leverage the rich art collections at the V&A Museum to stimulate visitors' emotional engagement and thus expand their visitor base? Introducing Heart to Heart, which is a wellness program to transform art museums into therapeutic environments, which can help visitors express and discover themselves through art, improve mental well-being, learn how to appreciate art, and build an emotional connection with the museum objects. We all know that art therapy is powerful in healing. It is for self-expression and self-discovery for people of all ages and abilities. But why applying it in a museum is a smart idea. First, museum objects can depict human experiences and symbolize the current or past experience of visitors that people can easily relate themselves. Second, as a cultural space, it is a safe environment to let people depart from everyday activities and express emotions. It also stimulates creativity for art making, which can change visitors from passive viewers to self-expressive artists. As the first focus group of the therapeutic program at the V&A Museum, I decided to look at people who are emotionally affected by the recent lockdown. A lot of research proved that couples living together under lockdown are experiencing growing unease in their relationship. 23% of them are having pressure on their relationship, and people aged 25 to 34 are most likely to doubt the future of their relationship. As the first program, Heart to Heart is tailored to help young couples strengthen their relationship through art as communication with 3 steps: discovering their relationship strengths, having a healthy and relaxing conversation about the relationship, and creating a common vision of the future. Here is the overview of the journey. When they arrive at the V&A Museum, they will be guided by a few art therapists to have a briefing session. Since the experience are self-paced with audio guide in a mobile application, they need to know when they should seek guidance from art therapists who are on duty in the museum. After the briefing, participants follow instructions on the audio guide and art journal to strengthen their relationship with 3 sections. Section 1 aims to discover the relationship's strength of participants by recalling some of their romantic moments in the past. They are guided to visit some museum objects and listen to their stories and some hidden facts. After that, participants will answer some questions in the art journal based on their personal experience in the relationship. They will then have a conversation about the elements that can strengthen the connection. Section 2 is about expressing and understanding participants' current feelings towards the relationship. They are suggested to spend around an hour to wander around the museum to find the exhibits that they can emotionally relate to, and answer some questions by sketching the selection of exhibits to express and communicate their feelings and thoughts to their partner. Section 3 helps participants to create a common vision of the future with their partner. They are suggested to spend around an hour to create artworks to illustrate the imagination of the desirable future of the relationship. After that, they will be asked to chat with an art therapist for a reflection. The therapist will collect their feedback, give them advice, and evaluate if they need to visit a professional therapist. The museum can design other therapeutic programs in the future to reach more audiences. For example, strengthening bonds between family members and coping with stress with colleagues or classmates. That's the end. Thank you very much. So the following project is next.
Yeah, hello, I'm Hui. I'll present our project next. Next is a comfortable chatting environment on an audio social network platform, which connects applicants who want to study abroad with overseas students, so as to help people enlighten other people. Next slide. Here, applicants can get accurate test information about studying abroad. On the other hand, overseas students can also get a sense of achievement, personal brand building, and additional income. What's more important is to achieve these goals through a high frequency and fun way of information interaction, that is, drop in for a chat. Next slide. In order to create this casual and relaxed atmosphere, Next is not just about audio and conversation. It's also about sunshine, stars, and bonfire, etc. Because it's an unusual service that incorporates the environment into the chatting interface, such as seaside campfire, deep light cafe, and old-fashioned trains, etc. Next slide. And another highlight of our project is that we use TikTok as our prototype tool. And one of our teammates, Chow, acted as a knowledge sharer, publishing content about studying abroad on TikTok. And we have successfully accumulated over 97,000 followers in 3 months and gained nearly 10,000 valuable comments. And we directed some TikTok fans to our WeChat group. In the last 4 weeks, we organized 10 different activities to test different modes of conversation with 181 users participating. In order to complete the prototype of the business, we generated actual revenue through the 3 additional services after the activities we held. And our conversion rate is approximately 10%. And from this, the conversion rate to high transaction customers was 3.8%. And we also attract a startup fund from our classmate. And I like to show our videos. Next slide.
你在哪里？是15寸的屏幕前，还是8平米的书房中？你看似有万千选择，却又一次次孤身困在原地。但你是否知道，你的故事绝非如此狭小。这个精彩的世界会与你有关，那些能点亮你的人会与你同行。你的成长现场该有人中物证，阳光、星辰、霓虹灯、青草田，遇见更多的世界，遇见点亮你的人。
And next slide. Yeah, finally, we hope that next is a cozy place where people can enlighten other people. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wei Tong. We're actually going to add another project onto this before handing over to Jenny, because Jess may not be able to stick around. But the next project we've got lined up is Ray. So we're going to move straight onto that now, and then move back onto Jenny and a little bit of discussion and reflection. So there we go. Brilliant. Thanks, Cami. Sorry to change the order, but don't want to miss out on this.
Thanks so much, everyone, for flexibility. Hi, I'm Jess Stein. I actually worked on this project with B. Mandelstam. B is actually on holiday in Greece, but if you'd like to chat to us more, we'd be thrilled to connect. Our details are on the site. Our project was Ray. Slide, please. And if there are 2 things that I could leave you with today, it would firstly be that we need better words when it comes to describing our sleep, and secondly, that the before sleep is sort of ripe area for design. Slide, please. So we collaborated with IKEA for this project. IKEA has led research into future sleep value spaces for the last few years. If you look in the bottom left quadrant, they're of course a traditional purveyor of mattresses and beds. But with this project, they really encouraged us to say, look at the market, but do something a bit different. And our initial assessment, we basically said to ourselves, this heavy bedroom focus persists when it comes to sleep design, even though increasingly research shows that sleep really touches every part of our day. And secondly, our prevailing metric is still hours slept, even though we increasingly know that tracking hours actually is detrimental to our sleep. And we probably intuitively know that there's more to sleep than hours slept. Slide, please. So B and I were really interested in the lived experience of sleep, if you will, and the way that we approached the sleep journey was to lead Zoom walkthrough calls through people's homes. So we have about 20 hours of footage probably giving us more personal access than we would have had prior to coronavirus. And our primary takeaway was that sleep journeys actually start earlier, and that, again, as I said, the before sleep is undesigned for. Our second methodological, slide, thank you. Our second methodological approach was to look at extreme user sleep journeys. So extreme users in this case were shift workers, so DJs, restaurant managers, nurses, police officers. We were really interested in the hypothesis that they were sleep designers because they have to approach their routine and sleep differently outside the sort of traditional or fixed schedules. Slide, please. So taking these two considerations, this before sleep and the idea that you might have movable pieces of your sleep journey, we developed a fictional speculation known as Ray, based on the rediscovery of a before sleep phase. And we developed a fictional chemical reaction that results in illumination, drawing from scholarship on the historic shift from polyphasic. So that was when we slept in multiple phases to monophasic sleep. Slide. This really gave the pretext for us to develop a new line for IKEA, the Every Room edition, and a new range of products and lifestyle offerings. Slide, please. More broadly, I think something we'd love to leave you with today is this project was really a way in for us to think about the role of language in design and how the way that we talk about sleep shapes what's made. All of these examples are on the site, but just to sort of dive into one of them more specifically, if you look at the second image, the Venn diagram, there's studies that show that in languages that have more words for blue and green, you show an enhanced ability to distinguish between blue and green. And so we were really interested in the idea that language shapes perception, but then it also shapes what you as a designer respond to and make. So our takeaway was the before matters, but we don't really have words to use for that. Slide, please. So stepping away, I think, from like user-centered design methodologies, we were really interested in how the design brief is a site of catalyst. So how could we use different words? What terms for sleep do we as designers need? So we prototyped a series of briefs for extended sleep journeys, showing these with textile designers, set designers, product designers. So you can see one response here from a textile designer who created a device that syncs your breath to a light pulse. And she was really interested in how you aestheticize sleep. Slide, please. So some final reflections I'll leave you with today. So firstly, the value of speculation within rapid prototyping. Creating a fictional scenario really freed us up to develop products and services with fresh considerations. Secondly, the role of tangibility within user research. Our products were very much linked to the stories that we heard, but in giving them tangible form, we were able to solicit responses from users. Thirdly, the role of history over sci-fi. I think often, or at least in my experience with speculative design, there's the temptation to think, oh, I have to develop something really future-facing, but actually looking to historical sleeping patterns proved really generative for us. And fourthly, the role of language as a design tool, just to re-emphasize that Ray became a container word for existing behaviors to make them legible. So in the same way that when you say Hygge, it brings to mind a set of behaviors and product experiences. So how can we do that for an extended sleep journey? Slide. Well, thank you. And our contact info is there. We'd love to chat more.
Thank you very much, Jess. Great to hear about that project as well. So we've got 3 projects we've just heard, fascinating as well. Jenny, I'd love to hand over to you and your reflections and questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All 3 of those projects were extremely interesting because they all touched on the very sort of sensory, visceral emotions that are brought out by objects and sound and the services that you were creating. So there was a really interesting pattern even between those 3. And Jess, I thought your point about language was very interesting because it is one of the key things that you need to do as a designer is to sort of take a step back and question how the concept that you're working with is framed and talked about and the metaphors that are being used and where it is that holds back different forms of progress. And I thought that came through very strongly in your work. So, you know, for those of you who know a bit about narrative, the metaphors that we use really do influence the ideas that we're able to have in a way. So if you think about an argument as being like more like a battle or a conflict, or whether you think about it as a dance, really does change how you then address it. So that was very interesting to see that in your work. And I also really like the fact that you're thinking about not just how you yourselves create those products and the services around them, but what it means to then use the thinking behind that and the principles behind that to inspire other people to take those briefs forward. And I think we saw a little bit of that in Acrossilo earlier on as well, where they were thinking about the patterns that they'd derived from the services that they created and how they might inspire other people. So that was very interesting. I wondered if you might say something about any sort of feedback that you got from IKEA collaborators and what they found interesting about that approach.
Thank you for the question. So we actually are presenting to IKEA in the next month, so I'll have to let you know afterwards. I can say, at least with regard to feedback we got from some product designers, they made it very clear that the shape of briefs is really variable, and so some are really materials led. In some cases you get very rich user research, and so I think that was really interesting to us to think about where we could have better briefs for product designers.
Okay, that's very good work, thank you. And Hui Tong, I'd like to ask you, because you were running lots of experiments with what kind of quality of atmosphere was making the right connections between the students in overseas and people here. What did you learn about what worked best in those connections?
Yeah, for the overseas students, they are the supply side on our platform, and they have a relatively high life pursuit, and their impression of wonderful express comes frequently from the atmosphere. Most of them live alone, and they can naturally use voice product. And this is why the idea of connecting the two parts through an accompanying audio service with atmosphere is reliable for us. Yes. Yeah, just imagine, for the overseas students, their best moment want to share something or to talk to someone is after taking a shower, when they feel relaxed. Yeah, this is we want to achieve.
Very interesting insight. And so you've managed to take something as far as feeling like you have a working product right now that you're getting some traction with and lots of interest in. Can you say something about the opportunity that you can see now that you couldn't see a few months ago? So how do you understand now what it is that the service is doing that surprised you, or that you're thinking about differently now?
Yeah, for our group, after we get our target user is overseas students and applicants in China, and the most difficult part for us is how to group the overseas students and the applicants in China. So for the applicants, our first part is to put our step in the applicants. So we choose TikTok as our prototype tool and to attract them. I think as a service designer, I think it's really good for us to explore more methods to do the different parts to do that, just be more open to find a new way to do the prototype or to do the together with users. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good to hear you say that, because I think you can easily get sort of carried away by the immediate successes that you're having.
Yeah.
And it's important to keep using that prototyping approach to explore the lateral possibilities that are around what you're seeing, because you're still in a way trying to understand what this could be as a phenomena and how you could sort of draw out all of its sort of value and potential. So it's very exciting to see that work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Cami, I mean, you've kind of gone right to the heart, as the title of your project suggests, of what life is about, which is, you know, how is it that we get along with other people? And this period of time has really condensed those relationships and made us think about how it is that we do that. And I thought it was really interesting that you had chosen to use a sort of museum environment and the objects inside a museum to provoke a different kind of conversation, because they are sort of places of, a museum is a kind of place of a different kind of reflection, isn't it, where you sort of touch the history of what's gone before. And just like Jess said, you know, looking back at the history of things can also be a very good way to sort of think differently about your current situation. Can you tell us a bit about what it is that you really think those objects are doing in that conversation? How would that conversation work as well if the objects weren't part of it, or what is it you think that they really bring to that?
Thank you for your question. Because as we all know, that museum objects actually depicts human experiences and symbolize some of the past experience. So visitors can actually easily see themselves in those objects. And maybe through those objects, it's also kind of a way for them to open to their partners. Like, when you see these objects, I think of this kind of feelings or stuff like that. So they can let their partner understand what they are really thinking right now. The museum objects maybe can add some kind of like metaphors for them to express their feelings. And through those like kind of like symbols, I think it would be easier for their partner to understand their current feelings.
Yeah, very, very good. And can you tell us what the role of the therapist in the art therapist in the museum? Do you think that's how important is that role? Because it seemed to me that in a way you sort of created a set of conditions in which people are working through that experience themselves, and then the therapist comes in at the end and evaluates how they did or not. Do you think that's necessary, or what are they adding to it, or what would you say is needed from them?
So our therapist is actually still a very important role in this journey. I want to make it into a self-paced program because I would like to include more people in the service. So it's not like only one therapist to lead like only several participants. So in a typical art therapy, there's only like relationship between art therapists, patients, and artworks. But in this service, the main activity would be creating conversation between participants and their inner self or in their partners. So art therapist kind of is like a at the back of the service, and they kind of act like a supporting role throughout the whole journey. So if the participants have any questions they would like to ask, or they have any confusion about the emotional response that they have, they can just talk to our therapists. So they will just walk around the museum and keep looking whether people need their help. Yeah. And then at the end, they will also have a reflection session. They are encouraged to have a reflection chat with the art therapist. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
I mean, it's interesting because you're sort of picking up on what is normally quite I suppose either a sort of one-to-one relationship, and thinking about how you open that up to hold a different set of relationships between the people involved in that service. And it's very interesting to see you thinking through how that might work and what you need to do to support the therapist themselves to step into that slightly different role, and what's involved in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for those presentations, and Jenny, your great questions. I'm going to hand over to you now, if that's okay, for you to share a little bit about your perspective on all of this and the amazing work that you've been doing over the years.
Great. Well, I'm very happy to, but I have to say that I think think that your work is much stronger than mine is. So I don't know whether I'm like the poor relation in this conversation, I think. But let me tell you a bit about sort of how I think and what we've been doing over the last few years. So I guess Carolyn asked me to into this discussion about the human condition, and I suppose we're all thinking about the sort of general human condition at the moment, because all of this is happening in the sort of the shadow of big transitions that society is going through, driven by an aging population, climate emergency, the automation of work, and of course the sort of aftermath of the pandemic that we're living through at the moment. And I think that can create a real feeling for people that they're on a kind of inevitable trajectory, that they're at the mercy of sort of very big systems that they feel quite powerless to change. And I think it's important to hold on to, and I think you've all done this in your work, the fact that it is people who make systems. We make them, we can change them. We've done that throughout history. And in a way, the biggest transformations, when we see big social innovations, they often come more from a breakthrough in social philosophy than they do through scientific breakthroughs. So it's important that as designers we're picking up on sort of new ways to live and amplifying those. So when I talk about those social breakthroughs, that could be anything from the women's liberation movement that led to the creation of the contraceptive pill, which went on to completely reshape the labour market and how most parts of society work. And I think we're in the sort of middle of one of those big shifts with things like this, which have appeared very recently as indications that this is the Greggs vegan sausage roll, if you're not familiar with it. And they really mark this sort of huge transition that's gone on from the creation of the vegan society back in the 1940s, which was a tiny niche activity, to suddenly this big shift in societal values around vegan lifestyles and plant-based products that's really reshaping mainstream food industry. So we're in the middle of these big social transitions in philosophy and values that are shaping industry and services in a completely different way. And that's important because this is a graph from an economist called Carlota Perez, who studies the big booms and busts that go on in society. And what she says is that we experience golden ages as a society once the development of new technologies comes together with a new idea of how to live. Up until then, we get sort of bubbles and then we get recessions. But once those two things combine, then we really experience a golden age. So, for example, we had huge investment in the automobile industry, mass production in the 1920s, but it wasn't until society shifted to suburbanization, consumer lifestyles, that those kinds of technologies really came into their own and made it possible for us to live in a very different way. So it could be that right now we're in a moment where we've got lots of interesting technology, but we haven't yet figured out the kind of lifestyles that we want to live with to make use of those in good ways. And so she would say that we're heading towards a green economy that's about sustainable living and how we remake our idea of the good life within planetary boundaries. And so I think this is really interesting, because I think as designers we're always trying to think, what are the patterns that help people to live well? What does it mean? What does human flourishing mean? And what have we learned about the ways in which we can design systems and services to promote human flourishing? And that idea really goes back to Christopher Alexander in the 1970s, putting together his pattern language for how you could design the built environment. His idea at the time was that if you made those patterns clear to people, then they could construct their own environments and ways to live well. And I think our challenge now is to look at where the principles of new services and systems are and help many people to put those into practice in new ways. So when I think about the human condition, I generally think that it's all about two things. It's about power and it's about love. And as a designer, you're usually trying to find out how to work with both of those. So we've seen some huge influences of different ideas about power through society, coming from people like Jeremy Bentham in the 1700s, who built this new, he was an architect, and he built this new kind of prison that was about a type of disciplinary control where prisoners don't know whether somebody in the central watchtower is watching them or not, and that's what creates the ability to discipline people. And we see that play out in modern society in all sorts of ways, whether that's the way that we monitor people at work or CCTV systems, or even quantified self apps that kind of doing a similar kind of thing. And then on the other side, working with love, I'm sitting here in Denmark right now, and very interestingly in Denmark, the word for tax is the same as the word for darling or dear. So you might say that tax is an act of love in some way. It creates a more, I'm not sure whether everybody would agree with that even in Denmark, but it creates a different kind of way of thinking about our connection to other people and the kind of unity that that creates. And it means that Denmark has lots of systems that are based on some high levels of trust, like the Copenhagen Library system, which is almost entirely run by the public themselves. So they leave it open in the evenings, and people can use it as they wish. But I think one of our huge challenges, of course, in the UK is how we design systems of intimacy, care, and empathy. And what does that mean? What does it mean to create intimacy at scale? How do we do that? And it could be that people like the Bertzog Cooperative in the Netherlands and Shared Lives Plus in the UK are sort of pointing to new ways that we might be able to do care systems in a very different way that balance power and love in the right way. And I guess I've had the opportunity to work with these kinds of ideas over the last 10 years of doing social innovation work. And all of that work has been about trying to put different kinds of system principles into practice, starting with the work that I did with Hilary Cottam at Participle, which is about creating a new suite of public services for the UK, built on a really different set of principles. So what would it look like if services got stronger with participation rather than being burdened by demand? What would it be like if we opened them to everybody and thought of people as assets in those systems? What would it mean to focus on capabilities rather than needs? How could we mix different types of resources on the same platform? And so that was a kind of experimentation over 10 years of trying out those different principles. And it led to really different approaches to how we thought about employment, aging, young people, healthcare. And those new services, they saved money, but mostly importantly, they created a completely different relationship between people and the sort of institutions that are there to serve them. And I think people felt that, and it was a very different experience to be part of those services. And then more recently through now, we've been running sort of large-scale programs where we have supported entrepreneurs and innovators to try and build new services and systems to shift some of the big dynamics in society. So this one was about economic inequality. So we were supporting people to tackle these like reinforcing things that go on that increase the gap between rich and poor. So where we see accumulation of wealth or polarization in cities, or a sort of shrinking middle income group, precarious work. So they were developing new kinds of business models and new kinds of services that interrupted those dynamics and got resources flowing in a completely different way. So that was things like a new type of land deal that puts that makes public land available for affordable housing development by putting it into a public trust and then using private finance to develop that. But the affordable housing still remains publicly held by the public, and the volume of affordable housing that's possible. Or a platform that buys the businesses of business owners who are about to retire and converts them into employee ownership, which we know has a sort of positive effect on reducing inequality. So in those kinds of programs, we're trying to come at these sort of big challenges from all sorts of different directions, but with the same set of principles underneath. And then most recently, we've been working with the Royal Society of Arts and MasterCard on how we can build a new platform for independent work. So the system that we have of benefits and employment benefits and training and social insurance and unions, that was all created roughly sort of in the 1930s around making factory jobs much more attractive. And it really doesn't work now for what is a significant minority of people who are in independent work. So we've been supporting a group of entrepreneurs who are building the components of that very different system. So they're building income smoothing applications, new insurance products. They're collaborating with a new kind of union that represents independent workers and gives them more of a voice over their working conditions. They're building platforms that broker gig work, where people themselves are much more in control of how they do that work and when it happens, and working together to do that. So what's interesting about that is that by bringing those innovators together, they're sort of starting the new system between them. It's like a kind of microcosm of this new kind of system where all of those services are working together to provide a new suite of offers for independent work. So I guess these are kind of examples of the types of system innovation that we need to transition to these better systems. But the question is, how do you actually use your design skills to help make those more profound transitions happen? It's one thing to develop the concept, and it's another thing to sort of put it into practice. And I guess I would say two things about that. The first is that firstly, it's not so much about how you're designing the apps on the operating system, but how you're designing the operating system itself, if you take that metaphor. And that's a metaphor really for the fact that most innovation happens inside the current system, and it's about improving it or extending it or making it work in a more efficient way. And if you really want to help society make these kind of transitions, then you have to think not just how do you join things up inside the current system, so better product service systems, if you like, but how are you challenging what you might call the deep structure of the system itself? So how are you questioning the purpose of the system, the logic that's behind it, the assumptions that it's making about what the system is for, where power sits, and what new resources would that unlock things in a different way? And if you do that, what kinds of new relationships become possible, or do you need to make in the ecosystem around the solutions that you're creating for that new system to be possible? So we did this with employment, where we if you think that most work is found through word of mouth, but what our current system does is hold people in a queue with other people who are out of work. So they've got almost no opportunity to build those connections and networks that you need to move into work. And that's because we frame the challenge as an unemployment challenge. It's about fitting people to jobs. And actually the much bigger challenge that we have, certainly in the UK, is underemployment. Lots of people who would like to work more and don't have the opportunity to. And lots of people who are in transition between industries or, in different sort of fields and areas, who are trying to make those transitions. So as soon as you start to understand the purpose of the system differently, you start thinking, well, maybe this is more about ongoing employment, and how do we do that differently, and what does it mean to support people through these transitions. Then you start to see that maybe people who are employed are perhaps your biggest asset, and so they become both the users and the resources in what was previously a system that was only for unemployed people. So we started to build very different relationships between unemployed and employed people who were all trying to make some kind of transition, and sort of built a new employability service out of that. So there you can see we're shifting the purpose, the power, which is going much more away from job centre caseworkers and into the connections between people themselves and the power of those connections. The resources that you're opening up are completely different, and then the nature of the relationships that you're supporting are more like sort of many-to-many relationships than the one-to-one brokering that goes on in the job centre system. So that's one way to think about what you're actually doing when you're using your services to shift systems. And then the second thing is about the fact that if you are doing this, then you're obviously coming up with things that run very counter-culturally to what's happening in the system right now. And so you need to be thinking about how is it that you're going to scale up your service or your system without it becoming co-opted by the current system. So falling back into the more dominant patterns that go on within the current system. And so that's a big challenge for us. It's a big challenge for us in our work at the Rockwell Foundation and the entrepreneurs that we work with in Alt Now. And one of the things that I think is really helping us is that we've stopped using service blueprints and training wheels and things like that as a way to scale up our services. And instead what we're doing is that we're training people to understand a very small set of principles that are underneath the service that we've created. So maybe 3 principles. And then we're teaching them, so this is staff in job centres or teachers in schools or people who are running housing systems, that kind of thing. We're teaching them to devise, which is a kind of form of prototyping that's a bit like devised theatre, the activities based on those principles. So they start to think, okay, in this situation, if I was acting from this principle, what would I do and how would that work? And then they're using that action to learn whether they get the effect that they're looking for or not. And we've found that this is much more powerful because they understand the intention behind what they're doing, but it also gives them much more authority. So every time they come up against a barrier in the existing system, they're able to think, okay, if I was acting from this principle, what would I do to overcome that barrier? So it gives them a way of navigating between the new and the old, if you like, and to do that in a good way. But I think I will finish here so that we can hear the last set of stories. And just to say that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was in the position that you're in, service design didn't exist. It wasn't a thing yet. And I mean, it's been hugely influential. I remember having a conversation at the Design Council when I worked there, where we put forward a proposal to start a new kind of course on service design. And everybody told us that it wasn't possible and it wasn't a thing and it didn't exist. So it's really good to see you all and realise how far that it has come. And of course, all of that happened at the same time as a big interest in thinking. And that has made huge advances in industry, in sort of promoting a design way of doing things. But I also think that we're seeing now that some of the greatest advancements in that approach have also become our greatest limitations. And so you take this work out into the world and everything that you've learned over the last year or so, to hold on to what it is that is important about your own creativity. So I think that when we look at design now, we can see that there has been an over-focus on a user-centered approach. We need to think much more now about how we center relationships, what it means to design for society as a whole, rather than individuals as atomized elements. I see a lot of co-design that is very well intentioned, but ends up with a very, very bland outcome. And I think that your job is to be daring and to be transgressive and to lead the kind of creative leaps that are necessary for us to break through some of the big societal challenges that we have now. And I think the other thing that holds that process back is an emphasis on iterative development, which has been really sort of promoted by Agile and sort of that tech industry kind of approach to development. And I think that is making the kind of progress that designers are able to make very incremental. And so I'd encourage you to hold on to what it is that allows you to make the radical leaps that you need and to create much better, not just fixing solutions, but really pushing things forward. And the other thing that I see when I look for designers to employ is that a lot of people are using prototyping to validate ideas. They've had an idea and then they're using prototyping to confirm it. And we really need to shift to using prototyping to really explore potential, and again, to be transgressive in the way that you're doing that. And because if you're not hitting something that's making people uncomfortable, you don't know where the real resistance is. And once you know where the resistance is, then you know what you have to design, and prototyping is the only way to uncover that. And I guess that is all wrapped up in a sort of focus on solving problems and fixing things. And the bigger challenge is how you see opportunities, frame them differently, and realize them. And I do believe that designers are one of the only disciplines that can really do this. And it's a sort of imperative that we sort of see the potential for these new ways of living and help to bring them about in this way. So I will finish there, and I look forward to hearing the last couple of projects.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for that very thought-provoking talk. I really love the way you talk about, you know, what is the human condition, and the power and love is such a simple but very helpful pairing of words, and the context of students' projects, I think, really demonstrates those elements are there in all of their projects, and how by being daring and trying to create the conditions for people to react in a different way, to change the scenarios that they're used to being in, and to help them to think differently. I can see a lot of that in the work that the students have. So all of that great knowledge that you have and the work that the students doing is really, really inspiring. And you've been out in the world for a while now trying to create that change and know how challenging it is. So I think ending on that last slide is really inspiring and helpful, I think, for the students to go out there and to carry on what they're doing, and not to be afraid, and to be confident, to be courageous, as some of the values that we list in our values. I just wondered if any of the students had a question or anything that they'd like to ask you before we move on to the final three projects, or anyone else in the audience. Nobody at all. I think everyone's still digesting all of those diagrams and thoughts and reflections, because clearly there's a lot in there, that there's a lot of hard work to do to really shift systems, organisation, society, and to not be afraid of the barriers that are in the way, and to confront them and to open them up, as you say, in a way that changes relationships, and to tap into people's humanity, essentially, whether that's in an organisation or whether that's in any other role that you're playing in your life. But without further ado, I think we'll move straight on to our next project. So I'm going to hand over to Cami to share the next slide, and we're going to be listening to a project. Actually, it's by Stacey, who couldn't join us tonight, but because she's 8 hours ahead, so it's the middle of the night, but she's recorded her presentation. It's called Everyone, and it's related to children with special needs in education in China. So thank you, Cami, for sharing the slides.
Hello everyone, I'm Yue Wen. My project is to help inclusive environment building in kindergartens for children with special needs in China. And this project is designed along with the special educator training program developed by my project partner, Beijing Ruizhi. We focus on the transition to kindergarten because it's the best timing for children to integrate and get better development. Parents of children with special needs spend lots of effort so they can have a better inclusive education. From the moment they get into kindergarten until they truly integrate, the transition can last several months. People often realize how difficult it is for them, but ignore that it's also very challenging for other stakeholders. When the transition starts, it might also be the time when other children have just entered kindergarten. They might still be in the pain of separation from their parents. And for their parents, how to understand those special needs and explain to their children are very tricky. Class teachers are nervous at the beginning because lack of special education knowledge and experience. So they don't know how to communicate with children with special needs, and they'll have to let special educators deal with all their situation. It means during the transition, children with special needs are physically in the inclusive environment, but they are not really integrated. So I did several online workshops with special educators, class teachers, organization leaders, and parents, and we co-created Everyone. It's a toolkit to support special educators and help everyone in an inclusive environment to have a smooth transition when children with special needs join, by offering integration strategies and collaboration methods with a 3-stage plan. There are corresponding focuses and strategies at each stage of the transition process. First stage, everyone welcome. Start with co-design integrate process to help kindergartens to decide the best timing, the right classes to bring children in, and understand the changes they need to make. And for class teachers, what they are going through has been experienced by special educators when they started their practice. So by sharing feelings and exchange experiences can help teachers fully prepared, and help all parents understand the strategy of kindergartens to support everyone and let them know teachers are fully prepared will help with trust building. Second stage, understand everyone. For children with special needs, their preference and inappropriate behaviors are different. So it's important to engage parents and the special educators and let class teachers know thoroughly about this individual kid. Then what could happen in the classroom because of these needs. Then they could help children develop their strengths. We came up with a 2-month program, Mini Power to Superpower, using workshops to engage teachers and parents to identify children's potentials, which are their mini power, and help them develop to superpower. Third stage, everyone integrates. After teachers have deep understandings of children, they can co-design activities or events to promote their strengths and avoid weakness. Making their strengths recognized by others will help with confidence building and integrate. By emphasizing with all stakeholders, improving communication and encouraging collaboration, Everyone Toolkit could make the environment more inclusive for everyone. And now I'm working with my project partner to develop the toolkit. So if you're interested in this project and the stories behind it, please go to RCA Service Design website for more details, or just send me an email. Thank you.
That's great. I'm moving on to Rosa's presentation next, and Is This Love?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosa, and I'm going to present you Is This Love? It's a project focused on emotional abuse within an intimate relationship, which involves a person's choice of words, of actions to control, dominate, intimidate, or degrade the other person. It's a project to prevent the worst of a part of the human condition, as this event highlights, and to prevent and stop abuse at first signs. Next slide, please. Because despite being the most common type of abuse, it is often hidden from society and suffered in silence in most of the cases. During my research, one of the insights was about the difficulty, time, and effort to recognize abusive behaviors when you supposedly love that person, as Lucy, who is in the first stage of the journey and confused if she is experiencing abuse. Next slide, please. Or Hannah, that recognizes abuse, but she has the challenge to acknowledge it and take healthier and strong decisions. Next slide, please. Or Maria, who recognized abuse after ending 2 abusive relationships, but needs to recover and understand healthy relationships. Next slide, please. These are stories based on real testimonies that I collected through a survey like this that gave me a second key insight. Emotional abuse leaves severe psychological and mental damage, but the vast majority of people suffering it do not ask for help, or when looking for it, they face an additional challenge. And it's that more support services are focused on treating high and imminent risk cases, and they don't engage with them. Next slide, please. Therefore, the core of Is This Love is a network of peers and specialists that emphasize with potential victims, giving them first the confidence to talk and share their experience with abuse and to cope with those conflicting emotions that block the capacity to move forward. Next slide, please. Is This Love acts as a connector of specialized coaches that provide online counseling and the peer mentors who have personal experience of recovery from abuse and offer live communication. The idea is to balance support with an active involvement of the users through online training, programs, and physical engaging activities that helps them to learn the skills necessary to develop and maintain healthy relationships for the future. Let's see how the experience is for the users in the video.
Manipulative, intense, jealous reaction over other men paying attention to me. It was a night and day emotional response, i.e. he was either hopelessly devoted or completely withdraw all affection.
Cheating, feeling constant pressure and criticism, calling me fake or generally casting doubt on my sincerity and commitment to issues that were fundamental to my identity.
Well, I wasn't aware of being in an abusive relationship until after I ended it.
Well, just to finish, as I would say, one of my conclusions is that design is a powerful tool, an approach to visualize and create new radical scenarios and solutions for a future where abuse in general disappears. It isn't worth having the large technologies for improving people's life if we have around 10% of the population frightened with abuse. So we can do it better. So thank you for listening, and a special thanks to people that are connected that I know from Denmark, from Barcelona, Madrid, Bilbao, and hope to see you in the virtual room if you have any questions with the project. Thanks.
Thank you, Rosa. Over to you, Kyo.
Yep. Just start the recorded video, please.
Hello.
Back to the previous one, please. Cami,
Yes.
can you back to the, yeah, this one. Just click, please.
Hello, I'm Kyo, and this is my final project, support musicians and music culture. Why music? Music is very fundamental human activity, and it's much older than spoken language. Music is global language, and we can understand the meaning without speaking. Music is bringing value too. Music industry generated huge financial value and creates tons of jobs. However, music culture faces issues. Venue is declined in London, which lost 35% grassroots venue between 2007 and 2015. Market has changed a lot, which is difficult for many musicians to have a stable income from digital platforms like Spotify. And the pandemic has disrupted the music culture, and we have no idea yet when it goes back to normal. So, we need to support the musicians' career and sustain the music culture. First of all, I started to understand the context in the music culture, especially for early-stage musicians' situation. According to the interview with early-stage musicians, I found 3 key pain points: unclear career path, super competitive market, and the journey is really lonely physically, financially, and mentally due to a lack of support system. And from the pain point, I mapped out the musicians' experience journey, and I picked up 3 needs from career development stage. Number 1, when musicians start career and they have less knowledge and network, so they need to improve their self-management skills. The journey is very tough, so it's necessary to get support physically and mentally. And number 3, they must have a chance to play with audiences where they can get feedback, encouragement, and improve their performance skills. These are the 3 key elements for musicians. And according to the interview with fans, early adopter group are key stakeholder group because they are keen to engage with early stage musicians in a supportive way. So I picked up 3 key needs from them. They always look for new music and musicians anywhere and anytime, and always try to find the emerging artists as early as possible, and always enjoy real engagement with musicians, which gives them a real pleasure. So we need to deliver these values. Finally, about music industry. Professionals emphasize how important to have a career management skill and how important to have a business mindset to be ready for the industry. And the music industry doesn't have a strong bridge between physical and the digital service, so there is still missed the opportunity area which is accessible but have strong loyalty from fans accordingly. So here the intervention point. We need to create accessible career journey, make new support system, and create more space digitally and physically. How can we do it? I enjoyed this banquet too. Let me share the video first.
Click, please.
Bank-Into is a music platform which we match, support musicians, and provide new experiences to both musicians and fans. I'm gonna take you to these service experiences from the beginning to the end. Here is you and the musicians jump start. Bank-Into allows the musicians to find the other musicians in an efficient way. We match them with Bank-Into Match, which is based on musicians' needs like skill level, genre, and location. We match you too based on your music taste. Imagine if you really like African tribal sounds, but it's difficult to find the same taste friends around you. You can easily find same-minded friends. After matching, we provide a unique space called Bump-Into Session, where musicians can play with others and engage with audiences. If matched musicians come up with unique sounds, they can test and improve it here, and you as an audience can witness the process of making new music. You can find the new music in a very creative way too. You can make own playlists to share any favorite music with friends. Or if you're a really busy person, you can use Bump-Into Radio, which you can find the new music anytime and anywhere. We invite musicians and you to secret gig. We provide more opportunities to musicians to play, and you as a fan can engage and interact with them. If you like the music, you can also send a small tip to artists, which is really supportive for early-stage musicians. Lastly, Bump-Into community. Bump-Into is basically supported by a lot of enthusiastic fans who is passionate about supporting musicians, so they can help Secret Gig as a community member. So this is the whole service experience journey. Thank you so much. I'm keen to talk with music lovers, so please contact me at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of all of our projects. So what's saying, Jenny, your reflections and any questions? Thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you very much to those last three. And I guess we'll start with Stacey, even though she isn't here, because the challenge that she's looking at, how you integrate people into a new setting or a new group. I think there's a theme in there about transition that was present in lots of the other projects as well. So when you're starting a new community of whatever sort it is, the process of introduction of people into that is very important. How do you manage that, and how do you learn how to sort of co-create that with your users was very interesting in Stacey's project. We're doing some work in Denmark about how to improve the prospects of ethnic minority students in Danish schools. And the challenges are very similar, that they have to integrate into a very different environment and sort of learn a different way of sort of thinking and operating in a culture that is not very familiar. And there's a lot of gain to be had by working with educators to sort of think about how they co-create that with both other teachers, because they're often working on their own, but also with the students themselves. And I think it would be interesting for Stacey to connect with a group called In With Forward in Canada, who run different kinds of experiences for children with learning disabilities. And they've found that in this period of coronavirus lockdown, when everybody's been moving online, that actually their ability to introduce those new ways of working has really increased. So that's a sort of positive story from this period of time. So that was very interesting. Thank you, Stacey, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to interact. Best of luck when you go as you go forward. And then we came to Rosa, who's working with one of the most difficult issues. Again, right at the heart of what goes on in very private household spaces and the intimate relations between people, and how it is that you help people to get some perspective on what's going on there. And Rosa, I thought your approach was really interesting, because having done a lot of work with social services in the last 10 years, I mean, one of the most difficult things that they face is that they put a lot of time and effort into trying to help people who don't yet fully, and so that process of recognition is very under-supported. So you're doing something very important there. And it's very interesting how you design for that process of validating people's experiences and trying to make that apparent to people. And I'd be really interested in hearing from you what thoughts you had about, like, what spark that first bit of recognition for people, or how they might reach out to the kind of network that you're proposing.
Yeah, it's a very, I mean, I would say it's one of the core of the question that has been around all the process. And because I have to say, at the beginning, I focused in domestic violence in general, but because of the lockdown, was much more even difficult to do research in this topic. So just talking to professionals, some big organization that work with domestic violence. So then we decided to go for this emotional abuse topic. And it surprised to me a lot when I launched this online survey, and I said, oh my God, maybe I was afraid about the ethics of doing something like that, launching this online through the networks and through through people that I know. And what is a surprise, that I got 30 testimonies, anonymous testimonies, obviously. And what I noticed is that people, they wanted to talk. I mean, in that sense, what I realized is that people want to talk, and also it's people that they suffer emotional abuse. Obviously, it's not people that maybe they are in the first stage of the journey. So, but basically, designing for this network it was for many reasons, but one is for people, they talk to other survivors, and it's when they realize that what they are suffering. In fact, it's like the second stage of the Me Too movement as well. It's like when you raise voices and you realize that this is abuse. And also connecting with different forums of survivors. So that's because gave me that idea. And also in the same survey, I test, but in a very low fidelity, the network. And it was one of the most, in the testing, one of the most features validate for the testimonies, basically.
Very good. Well done for making that happen in this period of time. It's very interesting to think about what it is that the peer network, the peers, gain from being part of that process as well. Do you have some insights into what you think they...
Sorry?
The people who are part of the peer network that you're building, do you have some insights into what kind of thing you think they might gain from being part of that process?
Yeah. You mean the peer mentors, or the peer mentors? That was one of the, because now it's what is happening. When I talk to people that they recover from emotional abuse, the experience was so hard for them that they wanted to contact the others. They say, if it happened to me and I hadn't a person that advised me about this, I mean, at the end, I think it's something that you say that about the new kind of relations. I mean, it's a relation for the good. I mean, because you don't want to other people it happen the same. So, and it's very important because sometimes we think that maybe our family and friends is the best people that can help, but it's not with emotional abuse, because sometimes even they don't even recognize. I mean, this is a lot of stigma with this topic. I mean, so yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Rose. I mean, I think in all of these types of services where you're trying to introduce a role that is not a professional role, it's a role that's coming from experience. It's a real delicate job to construct that in a way that you don't professionalize them.
Yes.
If you like. So it'd be really interesting to see, if this goes forward, like what that relationship turns out to look like. That's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And then Kyo, I mean, you're building an entirely new culture here. So what you're doing is culture building, which is a very interesting way of thinking about and looking at your project work. I really loved the sort of feeling of sort of being part of something secret, and I thought you'd done a really good job of building that feeling throughout the service. And it's very interesting how you've managed to create some sort of feeling of intimacy in something that is a very digital kind of environment. Can you tell us a little bit? You mentioned that the music professionals were looking for musicians to be more professional when they came into that into the industry. Can you say a little bit more about how your platform deals with that, or what it is you're doing about that?
Yeah, like I had an interview with the professional guy, and then like they often, they mentioned that like musicians tend to forget about business side. Like they are very good at making music, but they forget about like a copyright law or kind of how they raise revenue kind of stuff. So yeah, their expectation is like any musician should have this knowledge. So I didn't mention about industry so much, but I tried to match the people to cover each other. Like if someone is good at more business aspect or marketing side, they help. And then to make kind of like a, interdisciplinary team as a music band. So that's also concept, but sorry, I didn't mention in the slide.
That's really interesting to hear, because again, you're sort of finding out by building that community, or finding out what roles need to be played, and who might be best suited to play those roles. That's very exciting to discover those as you go along. Yeah, very good. Can you tell us something just to close off? Tell us something that surprised you as you were developing.
Surprising. Yeah, surprisingly, I got very good feedback. Yeah, that's a very good things. Yeah, actually, I try to deliver it, how people actually use it. So that's now like second stage so far. Yeah, and then also like I realized like how I mentioned like early adapters group, they are keen to help, not only paying money, but also more like kind of a physical support or more kind of a DIY stuff. Yeah, I asked them and they're happy to get involved in that more like kind of a backstage yard, which is part of a new experience. Yeah, that's kind of surprised me. And
I thought that was a great insight, that part of it, because it's a little bit like lots of creative people used to have patrons in some way, and that was a very familiar way of supporting creative industries. And I guess what you're doing is tapping into that feeling and making it more possible for more people to have patrons.
Yeah, and they also like still kind of music industry is more like kind of actor and the consumer. So I want to break this boundary to collaborate style rather than just consuming music. So yeah,
very nice. Yeah, very, very nice, because that just reinforces that feeling of sort of that you're part of an experience together, making it possible, making it work.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
I thought those were excellent projects to finish on, Carolyn.
Yeah, no, it was
Yeah.
really, it was really ending on a high in our theme night festival. They're just such powerful projects, and I think they're also different in terms of the themes they're focusing on, but I think you'll agree that each and every one of them you can really relate to, you deeply connect with. And thank you so much, Jenny, for not only sharing your work, but also through the questions that you asked the students. It was a really nice extra way to understand, you know, the power of the ideas they've had based on their approach, and that they would all have legs if they were to build on them further if they could. So thank you so much for that, and thank you to the audience as well for sticking around. It was a big group of projects in this last human condition theme, so really happy that you stuck around, and we really would love you to continue conversations with our students, if not tonight, over the next few days. And there's a link that Francesca's put in the chat. If you click on that, you'll be able to see all of the projects that presented tonight, and you can click directly onto any of the projects that you would like to, or the students that you'd like to speak to, and take you into a Zoom room. And if alternatively you'd rather wait for another day, you want to go and have dinner now, then there's a Calendly link which will allow you to book a meeting or a chat with them over the coming days. And of course, all of the email addresses are on the website too. So really would love you to connect with our students to find out more about them, about the projects. And all I've got left to do now is my final little job of the evening. Nearly forgot. It's not the last, Cami, if you could just, let me just see now. I got distracted. Yeah, it's not the last event of our festival. So tomorrow night we've actually got another event. It's the final event with our head of program, actually, Clive Grinier, and he's going to be in conversation with Andrea Cooper, who was the founder of the Government Policy Lab some years ago, and they've had great success. And she's just been made director of adult social care in Cornwall. So tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, Clive and Andrea will be in conversation. They'll be talking about the challenges and the successes of bringing design to policymakers and what it's like to be a designer, a practitioner, and academic today. So that's tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Thank you again, everybody, the students, Jenny especially, and the audience for sticking around. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime in the future. Have a great evening. Good night.